He has done more to save lives with illegal immigrations that were killing people, 500,000 criminals. He absolutely destroyed, smashed, blew up the whole mythology of Iran military invincibility forever. If he loses the House, he will be impeached.
Professor Victor Davis Hanson, thank you for joining Podforce One.
Thank you for having me.
I just wanted to say before we dive in that it's really good that you are here with us, especially after your recent lung cancer surgery. And I wanted to ask how you're doing.
Well, the surgery went really well. It was about 4 hours, and I had a funny thing called a mucinous adenoma carcinoma, which is 2% of all the cancers they see. Very rare, non-smokers, very hard to diagnose. And I'd had it for about a year and nobody knew. Every time I would cough or I would feel bad, they thought it was pneumonia or valley fever. So that went well, but unfortunately, an artery aneurysm or something happened and I bled out 3 liters in the ICU. Oh. And I had to be rushed back in for a lengthy operation, but the surgeon was very good and he found it. And, I had 5 transfusions, and at a little over 3 months, they say I'm doing very well for the anemia and the transfusions, and I got AFib with my heart, which I never had before. So I'm doing and then I have in 2 weeks, CAT scans for reoccurrence. It's a very rare mutation, so it appears only in the pancreas, brain, and lung. And they think it was contained here. So that would be good news. So I'll find out with the scans. And then they have a new thing that maybe your listeners are interested in called the Signatera blood biopsy. And they take a cancer tumor and they typeset all the 16 mutations and then they run through your blood. And they can tell whether you have one DNA of that particular cancer that may have gotten out after surgery. And then 4 months later, a tumor appears. But I'm hoping it will be negative. And then I think you do this for 2 years. And then at the end of 2 years, I'm considered okay. If it comes back, it's a kind of a very, very rare mutation that chemo or immunotherapy, because it's so rare, people have never developed so you either radiate it or take more of your lung out if it's in the lung.
And is that something that you've inherited? Is it in your DNA, that mutation?
People have said that. My mother died of a very rare cancerous meningioma brain tumor at 64. My daughter died at 26 of leukemia. But no male in my family has ever had cancer on either side. And I have 2 brothers, a twin brother who's a 2-pack a day smoker and an older brother who's a 2-pack a day. And they have
That's not fair.
I know it. Well, I'm glad that they don't have it, but it's,
yes.
And I exercised. I never smoked. I never drank. I've never used drugs. And the night before I got operated, I jogged 4 miles. So
really?
With the cancer. Yeah. So it was kind of a big shock. I told the surgeon that maybe I should have smoked. And he said, they said at the med center, you'd be dead because losing that much blood at your age, 72, and then 5 transfusions and then 1 platelets, a lot of people don't make it. And you were very lucky to make it. So you had a strong heart, they said.
Right. So you were meant not to be a smoker or a drinker.
Yeah, it's. I hope so. We'll see. I'm doing my best.
Well, you look fantastic, and
well, thank you.
I'm very happy that you're here, especially in this time of war.
Yes.
No better person to talk to than a preeminent military historian about what's going on in Iran, and particularly, I think, to do with Trump, because again, I think you better than anyone have sort of understood who Trump is and what he represents in history. And so he went into certainly the 2016 campaign and even 2024 on the promise of no new wars. And he inherited Ukraine, wanted to get out of that, but now Iran. How do we explain that?
I went back and read everything he said. He said no forever wars or no endless wars. I guess those were the two terms he used. And we're not fighting in the streets of Fallujah or in Helmand province the way we used to. So in some ways, they don't have any military leverage. Nobody is, even the left, for all their strained efforts, is not saying that we're losing the war as they did during Iraq or Korea, Vietnam. And that's because he, so far, hasn't engaged troops. So if you look at all of the engagements as president, the Soleimani, the al-Baghdadi takeouts, the bombing of the ICE, the destruction of the Wagner Group attack, Maduro last summer's flight, and this summer, this is the longest one. We're right at the end of 5 weeks. And does that constitute a forever war that he said he wouldn't engage? We've lost 13 soldiers. Joe Biden lost that many skedaddling from Afghanistan. So I just look at the other wars that, the misadventure in Libya was 7 months, no congressional authorization. They claimed they didn't hit dual-use infrastructure, but they took out a lot of cargo ships, port facilities, television stations in Tripoli. And so I'm not sure that we have to wait that this constitutes a forever or endless war. And he has this entity, this regime has killed more Americans than any other terrorist entity. Their argument was there was no apparent threat, but the more we're learning about, perhaps they had more enriched uranium and they had extended missile range, and they were quite ready to attack all of their so-called Gulf partners. They were a lot more dangerous than they seemed, and they never really ever had an apparent threat when they blew up. Nobody thought they were going to blow up the Marine barracks, the embassies in Africa, the embassy in Beirut, or try to kill Trump or Pompeo. There was never any heightened tension. They always do this episodically without warning. So there was a threat. The question, there's no military problem. If he has the military wherewithal to open the Strait, as Reagan did during the tanker war, and in 2018 and 19, as the U.S. military did when they tried to do something like this. It's all political, as you know better than I do. It's the midterms, it's the MAGA base, it's the counter-revolution survival. If he loses the House, he will be impeached. They'll bring the entire Trump entourage under investigation. They will have a recrudescence of lawfare. It'll be So he's going to have to avoid that politically. And that means, I think, he has a self-imposed timeline. I don't know where it is. Maybe it's mid-May or the 1st of June, but he has to have at least a 4 or 5 month window where he can get, oil prices will go down, the stock market will steady, interest rates might go lower, some of the foreign investment might be reified, the deregulation and tax cuts, so that if we were having this conversation in July, we would think back, or August, that the war is over and the economy is good, and then they can use their attention to stop this kind of crazy democratic agenda. But so what I'm trying to say is that the military has all of the solutions if they want to use them. It's just a matter of what political price, how high the political price is. And the long term, I think that's very important. The long-term outlook for Iran is not good. They probably suffered $500 billion in military and infrastructure damage, acquired that 47 years. It's going to take them a decade at a time when the people can't afford food or gas, and they're going to have to tell everybody in that restive country, we've got to rearm, we're going to continue, we've got to give billions to Arab terrorists, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas. And then the Gulf states are scrambling, as we read, to expand. And these projects might take 3 to 4 years, but they're going to expand their Red Sea ports, their Gulf of Oman port. They're even talking about going across Saudi Arabia and Jordan to Haifa. And if that's true, they can tell the Iranians, you're going to be irrelevant in a little while, because far from holding us hostage, we can get 20 million barrels eventually out of the Gulf states without going through the Strait. And we could close the Strait because you may be more vulnerable than we are now. So the long term is not good for them. And they turned on their so-called Arab friends or neutrals, whichever way we want to call it. And but they have a long memory too.
And the Hormuz Strait, there are some advisors to Donald Trump suggesting that the US doesn't really need to invade Karg Island or bomb the infrastructure there. It can, half the Navy, US Navy, is there sitting outside the Strait. It could just start blockading Chinese ships or, stop the Iranians making money, which will, they desperately need money now more than ever. Is that a solution rather than boots on the ground?
It's absolutely a consideration. It's a high stakes gambit, because if it were to work, it might shorten the war very quickly. But if it didn't, and I think it would work, but politically, people would say he's expanding the war, he's got troops on the ground. There would be some loss of life if we wanted to go in and occupy Karg Island as opposed to blow it up. But it would raise the stakes, and there would be greater risk and greater rewards, is what I'm trying to say. Very quick. And if he could easily do that. I think when he goes to China, he's going to tell the Chinese who buy 80% of Iran's oil. 80% of the Iranian oil goes to them, that if they want their oil, they're going to have to pressure the Iranians as well.
So blocking the Chinese ships from getting oil, or the ships going to China to have the oil, would be a pretty fast way of getting China to wake up and tell the Iranians to pull their heads in.
I think it would get their attention, yes, very quickly. And he could do it in an art of a deal, not an adversarial way, and just say, look, you can't rearm these people. They're a threat to even your suppliers in the Gulf. You just can't come in here, but we want to eliminate this problem, so you can go in here. And if you're willing to help us, we will not destroy Karg Island. If you're not willing to help us, there might not be any oil for you anyway, something like that.
And so do you think, paradoxically, this is sort of the left version, could Iran be defeated militarily, as they pretty much are, and yet still, that would strengthen the regime, the new regime, whatever it is?
First of all, a lot of the stuff that's coming out of Iran, their demands that the left latches onto, I don't think that's even for foreign consumption. I think that's for internal consumption among that regime. Because now that the top 40 to 50 people are gone, they don't know who's actually got the power, whether it's the secular elected leaders, or it's the military, or it's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or it's the remnant theocracy. And they're each mouthing off, trying to outdo the other and being strident and uncompromising. So it's very hard for us to know who's in control. But what we do know is that they're going to have to make a choice, and they're broke, and they have no defenses, so to speak. And the Chinese are not going to rearm them for free. They're going to either want money or oil. And the same goes true of Russia, and we can control that. And then the people are going to sit there, and they're not going to be very well off, and they're angry, and the regime is not invulnerable. We don't know what will happen in the next month, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months down. I don't think it's a very good scenario for them. It reminds me a little bit of what Reagan did to the Soviets with the Pershing missiles and Star Wars, and he put the pressure on sanctions, and everybody said, well, it didn't work, or he's courting disaster. And then he went out of office, and George Bush inherited the fall of, all of the collapse of the Soviet Union. But it was Reagan who did it. So I'm not sure how long it could take, but I think it'll happen, but it might take a year or 2 or even 3. But it's been severely weakened. That's why I don't quite understand the left's argument. On Monday, Trump was Hitler. On Tuesday, he was Neville Chamberlain. And they have no coherent message. And I think Trump, my suggestion for Trump would be, rather than getting in a fight with the former MAGA influencers, he should direct all their attention to the left and say how incoherent these people are. He could write a tweet and say, you guys have to decide whether I'm Hitler or Chamberlain, but one or the other, please. I happen to think I'm Churchill, but you disagree. He could have a lighthearted exchange to show how stupid they are.
In part, though, that's the sort of schizophrenic reaction to him is because of himself, his pronouncements like Truth Social, when he said, he's going to end civilization. And then, the next day everything's hunky-dory and there's a ceasefire, yet, missiles are still flying. But, do you think you look at that tweet where he says it's the end of civilization and, close the effing Strait, you crazy bees. Is that strategic or is it just an expression of frustration?
I think it's more sloppy use of nouns. I think what he was trying to say is, I know everybody got outraged, but the fact is, he said from the beginning, help is on the way. Who was that help for? And he is the first president really that conducted a war that has avoided, except for the one bridge, dual-use civilian infrastructure. We didn't do that. We hit everything in World War II, both in the Pacific and the European theater. Harry Truman was a mad bomber. They bombed every bridge in Korea, every hydroelectric plant. LBJ and Nixon, Rolling Thunder and Linebacker, they just destroyed the infrastructure of North Vietnam. We had that misadventure. I don't know what it was. I guess it stopped Milosevic, but the Europeans have this tendency to have unilateral, and they say, well, it's a coalition of the NATO. It was basically France and Germany and Italy and Britain said, we have a problem at Europe's door. So we went over there and ended up flying 80% of the missions. And we knocked out every bridge on the Danube. We knocked out the power grid of Belgrade. And then, of course, we were told that the French and the British had some NATO partners, and I don't know what our interest in Libya was. Gaddafi was kind of a reformer, but they thought the Arab Spring would result in something like Carmel, California or something. So we went in there and bombed 27,000 sorties for 7 months. We hit TV stations. We hit, as I said, cargo ships. We hit ports. And they said, we didn't hit any infrastructure. They did. And so when they say that Trump is a war criminal because he's going to hit things, they had done it themselves. Obama never got war authorization for Libya. He was there 7 months. He had 543 assassination drone strikes on the border with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Killed 4 citizens. They deserved killing probably, but they were U.S. citizens nonetheless. Nobody said a word. Obama joked about it. Remember at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he said, if you get near my daughters, it's called PREDA. That was at the time he was killing them. So I think what Trump should have said, and I think that's what he meant, because he was a dividend of the whole project. It was always stated that we're not going to have regime change, but we want regime change. And we'll create the conditions for it when they rise up. So if he had have just said, if you don't comply, I'm going to destroy the radical Islamic regime and its civilization and culture that have taken over a noble Persian tradition, he would have been fine. And that's what he meant. He really did, because he's never threatened the Iranian people. And he's always tried to avoid hurting them deliberately by, here we are in 5 weeks, he hasn't hit a power station. No, Bill Clinton would have never done that. And either did George Bush didn't do it. George H.W. Bush didn't do it. So he gets himself in these self-imposed paradoxes where he's actually much more careful than Obama or Clinton or LBJ, but then everybody leads, they just fixate, obsess with his tweets. And I'm not a sophisticated political scientist to know whether he baits them and they look so stupid that they get more political damage. Like Lawrence O'Donnell saying that when he said, no man left behind, and it was actually a man.
Yes.
And Lawrence, and he says it should have been no one, and they look so ridiculous. So I don't know if he's trying to bring them out like that, but I saw that a lot of people that you and I know very well Tucker said he was evil and he was anti-Christ, basically anti-Christian on Easter. Megyn Kelly used she used a string of expletives to say that she was done with him and she couldn't take that anymore, the bad language and all that. So I don't know the effect of it, but he could have phrased it in a different way because I know what he meant. I think most people knew what he meant. I don't buy the idea that a lot of his supporters are saying, well, he was only speaking in the language of the Middle East. And, he didn't really want to include the people of Iran. That was clear.
You've heard me rave about Cozy Earth's soft bed sheets. If you haven't tried their robes or slippers yet, you are seriously missing out. Their robes are unbelievably soft, perfect for slow mornings after a shower or just relaxing at night. The fabric is breathable, lightweight, and incredibly comfortable. It's the kind of robe you put on and immediately feel relaxed. And their slippers are super cozy too. They slip on instantly and have this plush shearling lining with supportive footbeds, so they're warm, they're comfortable, and they're easy to wear around the house all day if you're so inclined. With Mother's Day coming up, Cozy Earth makes an amazing gift, something your mum will actually use and appreciate every single day. And here's the best part. Cozy Earth backs everything with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty, so you can try it completely risk-free. Go to cozyearth.com and use my code DIVINE for 20% off. That's cozyearth.com, promo code DIVINE for 20% off. And if you see the post-purchase survey, please mention you heard about Cozy Earth from this show, Podforce One. You just mentioned Tucker Carlson, who, I'm very fond of, almost wrote his biography.
Yeah.
And you and I were both on his show when he was in his heyday at Fox. But I also am a bit dismayed about his turn, but particularly about Israel. And I understand where he's coming from. He really is very deeply anti-war, felt tricked because of the Iraq war. He was, working for Bill Kristol and felt that he was forced into sort of being a rah-rah supporter. But it's gone beyond that now to this sort of ahistorical view of Israel and of Donald Trump being pushed around and tricked. Where does that come from? And is it really, as I guess a lot of American Jews say, anti-Semitism? And why is anti-Semitism so resurgent on the right?
I don't know, because like you, I was on every Monday night. He was very affable. He never voiced any of these sentiments. I was on Megyn's show during the summer bombing of Kelly, and she was very supportive of the Trump. She actually said he was the only person who had, I think she used the expletive word, had testicles to bomb. She was very supportive, very rational. I don't know what triggered all of this, but in Tucker, there is one constant, and that is in Tucker's case, he doesn't have a staff or he doesn't look at the facts. So when he says that the Christians have been basically ethnically cleansed by Israelis from the West Bank, from Bethlehem, and they're treated better in the Gulf states where they can't even build a church and they have to worship in enclaves, where in Israel, if you go to Israel, you can see Arab mosque. I've seen them, and 180,000 Arabs and they vote. They have much better, and Christians and Arabs have much better treatment inside Israel than they do in the Gulf. That's just a fact. And they left Bethlehem not because the Israelis were pushing them out, but because they were forced in an impossible situation to mouth Hamas and Palestinian propaganda, or they would be persecuted. They know that. So that was completely false. And then he said when we went in to take the nuclear facilities out, we were on the verge of World War III. That wasn't accurate at all. It kind of started with the Ukraine when he went to the former Soviet Russia supermarket and said, look at all of this. Whereas anybody knew if you went 60 miles outside of Moscow, you'd see a different type of, it's sort of like saying, I'm going to go look at a typical American supermarket in I don't know, Palo Alto or Stanford Shopping Center where I work near there, but I also live here, southern Fresno County, where the per capita income is poorer than I could show you places that would look third world, maybe a quarter mile from my house here. So I don't know why, and he knows that. So the other thing is, I don't think the people even make the argument anymore. That used to be the argument on campus. Well, we hate Israel, but Israel is one thing and Jews are a second. They've conflated that now. They don't make any distinction. So when they talk about Israel, then they attack people who are Jewish, and you can see it. And they do it in two ways. They get in fights with they call, anybody who supports the war who's Jewish is under suspicion that he's using his dark powers of influence or money, or they'll say things like, why does a small group get us into this? And who's advising Trump? And this old anti-Semitic trope that there must be some really smart Jews. They said that about Roosevelt, that 2 or 3 Jewish advisors had got us into World War II. In fact, Tucker brought Daryl Cooper on, and they dragged that thing up about Churchill and Roosevelt. The few Jewish advisors they had were responsible for the war. So I don't think they know that. They know that. It would be as if I didn't like Arabs, and I said, well, the only reason we're in this war is because of Oman and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and they've got investments with people that know Trump, with the Trump family, and yet they won't fight. But what really breaks down is you could say, well, the Gulf states were telling Trump secretly, you've got to take them out. Then publicly they were saying, we don't want a war. And then when the war started, Trump was not hitting civilians. They were saying, level it. Yeah. And they have 600 fighters, combat aircraft. They've got double the number, aggregate Gulf states, and they didn't send one in a mission. And here Israel has 300, and they sent their entire force into Iran to help us. And so when you have an ally who is that competent and is willing to help you, and we have a national interest in Israel, they overlap in some cases, but we know that, and they know that we're distant and powerful, and they're proximate and vulnerable, and there's differences that therefore. So I don't think that, and then nobody tells Trump anything. I mean, the idea that Netanyahu can call him up and tell him to do this or that, nobody ever does that. So I don't know your question is what is driving it?
Yeah.
And I think they have a view, and I agree with some elements of it, that globalization favored the people with particular degrees, knowledge, media, law, tech, politics, universities, and they inherited this 7 billion market of consumers and audiences, and then they hollowed out through offshoring and outsourcing, and the people in the interior and they were ridiculed, Golun, irredeemable, dregs, chumps, garbage, clingers. And they look to that group and say, you were being sold out by globalists. And there's some truth to that, a lot of truth. But then they go the next step and say, who were the globalists and who were the people doing it? And then you get the idea, then they start talking about Hollywood directors and stock market people and people whispering in the ears. And that's kind of where they're going now. And they latch on to Netanyahu. And that's kind of a cloak. He's kind of a receptacle. So they're saying, I don't hate Jews. I don't hate Israel. It's just him.
Yes.
But he has overwhelming support. At least he had before the war, and he's maintaining a lot of it. He's been a good friend to the United States. I don't quite see. He said he got us in the Iraq War. I remember being a little bit confused that Netanyahu had told George W. Bush, don't go into Iraq. If you're going to do anything, Iran is a problem. And if you take away the counterweight, we're going to be in trouble. So he didn't really want to go into Iraq. And he tried to advise us that was the wrong target.
So looking back through history and all the classical wars that you know about, is there a parallel here with Iran who is Iran, who is America? I mean, Persia's been there, but what role does America play?
There are limitations to imperial, the left calls it imperial, Paul Kennedy overreach. But it is true, if to take the Byzantine Empire, that was the eastern half of the Roman Empire after the West fell. And they thought it would fall very quickly. It lasted for 1,000 years, its capital at Constantinople. But it developed, it had sort of our attitude. It had superior technology. It was completely outnumbered initially by Persia and what we would call today Arabs. And then with the advent in the 7th century of Islam, it was for the next 700 years, it was attacked constantly by Muslim armies and navies, and it survived. But it had certain strategic areas where it could go and where it couldn't go based on its demographics, its economy, and to the degree it controlled the Bosphorus and the Hellespont. So what I'm getting at is, and the same thing with the British Empire, you know that better than I do, that it was pretty solid until, the Industrial Revolution. By 1870, the United States was producing more steel, but World War I and especially World War II exhausted it, and it had reached the apex of its area of control. So our worries are that our fertility rate is 1.6 now. We're 37 trillion in debt. Our budget deficits are almost 2 trillion a year. We have $1 trillion trade surplus. We don't know how all that's going to be affected by Trump's efforts at the end of the year, but we have 53 million people in the United States that weren't born here. It's the highest we've ever had, and highest in percentage is 16%. And yet we don't believe in the melting pot. So we've got a rise of tribal chauvinism, ethnic enclaves. We've got a guy running for Senate in Michigan who says he doesn't know how the death of Khomeini is going to affect his Dearborn constituency. So we've got a lot of internal problems, and I think that is what the MAGA base is worried about. And Trump is trying to make the argument that this is an existential problem with Iran, number one. And number two, if it's eliminated, it won't just be neutral. It will change the entire Middle East, and without having to nation build on the ground. And it's consistent with his criticism, he argues, of George Bush sending Marines to fight the type of war they're not trained for, house-to-house fighting, and which the enemy wanted, and IEDs. And he's avoided all that. But there's definitely limits to American influence and power. And we've got to get our financial house in order. Some of the critics of Trump that I know that I don't agree with, but they have logical arguments. They're not conspiratorial. They say things like, let's finish the wall, please. Let's just get the wall done. And let's look at the deportations and then let's get rid of the sanctuary cities, and we have all these things to do, and we're not concentrating on them because of an optional war in the Middle East. And so those are the political strengths he has to deal with. I don't know what the timeline is. They established 4 to 8 weeks, or then later they said 6 to 8 weeks. I would say, since we're getting into week 6, whatever they're going to have to do, they're going to have to do it in 2 or 3 weeks. And then they're going to have to stop because politically it's going to be. And if it's a tremendous victory, it will actually be a political, better than I, it'll be a political benefit and give them some momentum. If they were to open the straits and they could have certification that the uranium is buried deeply into a mountain and scattered, and you don't want to bring it out or something, or they find it somewhere, or they close the straits, and then they let that ghost of a regime sort of just simmer and let the people deal with it.
So that's what success looks like. Yeah, that's victory. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, America could walk away now and allow Israel to continue, I guess, decapitating whoever in the regime they don't like who pops up.
Yeah, there's a big argument. I saw that quoted today in one of the there's a term in Greece called the ship of Theseus, and it's a philosophical problem. When Theseus went to Crete to kill the Minotaur, and he went back to Athens bringing back captives, then every year, that was a mythical event, but the Athenians always took that ship and sailed to the holy island of Delos and back. And as the years grew on, they had to replace it. It got old, so plank by plank. And finally, in Plutarch's age, 600 years after classical Athens, he said, is it really Theseus's? And the argument was, if you have an entity and all the parts have been removed, but it still has the basic resemblance or structure. I live in a house that was my great-great-grandmother's 1870. And I've had to take all the wiring, plumbing. I don't even know. It looks the same, but it's not the same. So people are saying, well, it looks like a regime, but all the component parts have been replaced. And somebody's told Trump that. So he keeps saying it's regime change. But I don't know we don't know to the degree that they're as competent as their predecessors, or they're as zealous, but is a very different cast there. And I think that's part of our problem. We don't know who they are, and they don't know who they are. I've never seen anything like it in a war. I've never seen the ability of an enemy to take out the entire command and control, theocratic, Islamic Guard, regular army, and do it at no cost. And the Israelis have been able to do that. And I think they could continue to do that.
I guess the Persians have shown remarkable resilience through history, though. Yes.
There's a lot of, there's also, this term, a Parthian shot. And that meant the Parthians, when you're leaving, you just unload at the enemy and say goodbye. I wish we had done that in Afghanistan. We were going to leave anyway, but we could have taken out the Taliban and destroyed all of the 50 billion or how much weapons we gave to them. And Pyrrhic victory is another one, and that is something that when everybody says Iran is winning, it's more than a Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus said, one more victory like this, and I'm done. So if they have one more victory like that, they're completely done. They've lost. All they have is somewhere, either they're getting some launchers or missiles across the Caspian Sea from Russia, or somebody's flying them in. I don't think anybody's flying anything in there, or they have stashes somewhere, but that is a finite resource, I think, their missile.
Before I want to talk more about Trump, but just do a little sidebar I can't resist. You mentioned Afghanistan, the botched withdrawal by Joe Biden. Is he, in history, the worst or among the worst presidents in terms of the damage he wrought with the border and, Afghanistan and the sort of social DEI stuff that he embedded across the country?
He would be on his record, but then the question arises, who was Joe Biden? Because I think he was non compos mentis for years. So I think what happened was the Democratic insiders in 2020 said, we've got to get rid of Trump. And he appeals to the middle class, and we've lost that. We've learned that we've lost that. And they looked at that clownish stage, Cory Spartacus and crazy Bernie Sanders and shrill Elizabeth Warren and self-righteous sanctimonious Pete Buttigieg. And they just said, this isn't going to happen. And then they got Clyburn and all the other people, and they got them in a room and then said, Biden is going to be the nominee. And so he's going to win Carolina, and we're going to win in Nevada. And he was way behind. He'd lost New Hampshire and Iowa. So they took a waxen effigy, and then they brought the whole retread Obama crew back in. And that was the most radical bunch we've ever seen. And Biden all his role was that I'm good old Joe Biden from Pennsylvania. I grew up in Scranton. I'm a good old boy, and play that role, sit in the basement during the campaign. And Jill was his communicator with her, I guess his liaison. And then they just it was Obama's third term, and it was you're absolutely right. It was the most radical. It was more radical than FDR because it was holistic. We're living with some every time we see a judge that makes some insane rule or lets a criminal, a murderer, it's always in the Biden period. And the COVID $7 billion that was just lost, a lot of the fraud that we're seeing in California was federal transfers during that period. Massive. And Mayorkas lying every day when we would see 10,000 people come across, and he would just look at us in the eye and say, the border is secure, or these are border people. How dare they whip people? It was just a 360-degree, 24/7 assault on our senses. And everybody just finally so yeah, I think he was the worst president in my lifetime. There was no doubt about it. And he was also, people forgot that about Joe Biden, but when he was running, I guess it was in 88, against Gary Hart and Dukakis, he was mean. I mean, people would say to him, your record wasn't, you played you don't know anything. I'm smarter. I was the top of, he was always that way. And he had a mean streak in him. He was never a nice guy. And that came out with him too. He'd call African-American aides boy, or Satchel Paige was a Negro. He'd said Barack Obama was the first clean black that could speak. And he was, there's something about him that is mean and snarly. He was like sort of the proverbial, when kids would ride bicycles home from school and they go across the grass, of some older person, you get out, get on. He was just snarly and cranky and mean, semi-fascist, you're chumps, you're dregs, you're garbage.
He was really malicious and I thought driven by hatred. And then when it came especially to conservatives, and
he was mean, cruel.
Yes. Semi-fascist, as you said. Yeah.
The iconic moment for me was about 36 hours, as soon as Donald Trump a week earlier said he was going to run for president in 24. Within 7 days later, all in a 24-hour, actually it's 24 hours, he brought in Nathan Wade, Fannie Willis, and he had him at the White House. We know that because Nathan Wade charged them legal fees to be told what to do. And then he had that Michael Coangelo, who was the third guy in the DOJ, and he had come there from Letitia James, and they sent him back to Alvin Bragg, to run Alvin Bragg. And then the same day, they appointed Jack Smith. So they were all coordinating all of these legal circuses. They were doing that intentionally. And then you'd hear leaks that Joe Biden said, why didn't you indict him? And why didn't you?
Yeah.
And then everything about him, and then the whole family was corrupt. And I don't know. It's just.
Well, it helped get Donald Trump elected anyway.
It did. It did. The two iconic moments when he did the garbage scene in the McDonald's, he must have got $1 billion in free advertising.
You've chronicled Donald Trump from the start. You saw in him something that, many people on the right didn't, elite right-wing conservatives, National Review, et cetera. And you got a lot of flack for it. But your 2019 book, The Case for Donald Trump, just tell us a little bit about your view of him as kind of almost a Greek tragic hero. And I think you likened him to, the character in High Noon, who the vigilante who saves the town, but then they don't want him.
Yes.
What is his intrinsic kind of power, and why are the things that so irritate sort of proper people about him part of his strength?
He's an outsider. He had no political, political IOUs. In fact, he said that the second term would be different because he didn't know what he was doing the first. So he appointed all these people like Rex Tillerson and Jim Mattis and John Bolton that didn't like him. But he thought that was what the Republican establishment wanted. So he understood that wasn't who he was. and he had been hoodwinked, and this time he got what he called loyalists. But in literature, going back to Sophocles, and in John Ford's movies, The Searchers, for example, or George Stephen Shane, there's this archetype. And he is a person that is a moral person in his strategic or ultimate outlook, but he feels that society is corrupt and has become anemic and is sinful in the sense that they see people hurt, but they won't take actions to help them because the means necessary are unattractive or are contrary to civilization. So when these societies become frozen or inert and they can't deal with this existential problem, then they turn to someone. Clint Eastwood made it famous in a lot of his movies, Pale Rider. John Ford, it was just typical in The Searchers where these farmers and the legal system, they've kidnapped, the Indians have come in and slaughtered people, they've kidnapped these two girls. Somebody has to go out and get them, and they bring in John Wayne. He has a very shady past, and he's racist, and he brings her back, but because he alone has the skills to do it. And same thing with Sophocles' Ajax. He's big, he's clumsy, but when Achilles dies, he's the person that saves them. Same thing. Well, I guess the best example is Shane. I mean, he's a guy who's an absolute killer, but he goes into this Jackson Hole Valley, sees all these sodbusters. They're wonderful people, and the cattle barons are slaughtering them and taking things. He's very quiet. He says, I'm done with it. I want to be like you. And then finally they say, we can't handle this. They're killing us. And then he puts on his guns. He goes in, and he kills the bad guys. And then he realizes that he has polluted himself, and he can't reside in that community. So what I'm getting at is, I don't think Donald Trump, when they have funerals in the future, that George W. Bush or Barack Obama or anybody's going to sit next to him if they can avoid it. And he's going to be a pariah. But he had the skill sets to not be, he doesn't care what the New York Times, it irritates him, but it doesn't, NPR, PBS, he just says fake news. And he doesn't really, if people have to tell Donald Trump sometimes who this person is. Do you know who that is? He owns so much, he's this big corporate guy, or he's this famous author. He doesn't know. He really doesn't. He doesn't care. So that liberates him to just do these things. And then he has an idea, I think, that he's not going to come to Washington. He's going to build a big Trump library and hang out in Florida. He'll never be in Washington again. So, and the moral of all of those modern tragic stories is it's tragic because they call it tragic because the person actually does very good things, but he has a tragic flaw that the ability to do those good things are innate in him because he's not necessarily polite or humane sometimes. And that usually in a Sophoclean play or a John Ford movie, then they leave it to you, the audience, to figure out where the morality really is. Is it with the townspeople who just let themselves be bullied and let innocent people get killed? Or is it with a killer who comes in and says, you guys are the good guys and I'm going to fix it for you, and leave? And that's where you are. I mean, Donald Trump, if he has done more to save lives with illegal immigrations that were killing people, 500,000 criminals. Yes, he said things, but George W. Bush didn't stop it. George H.W. Bush didn't stop it. Mitt Romney would not have stopped it. John McCain would not have stopped it. So all 7 presidents said that Iran posed an existential threat to us and that had to be dealt with. Nobody wanted to dare get into that. We were told that Iran was crazy. It was formidable. It was the terror of the Middle East. It was indomitable. You can go into Iraq, you can go anywhere else, but do not get near Iran. And people had said that. And Trump said, why not? And one of his accomplishments, he absolutely destroyed, smashed, blew up the whole mythology of Iran military invincibility forever. And I think even the Israelis were shocked about it. That they went in when Trump said go in the summer, and they took out the defenses, and then all of a sudden it was Orwellian. When the United States wanted to bomb the nuclear facilities, we had to ask the Israeli Air Force for permission to get into Iranian airspace. I don't think anybody had ever thought that would be possible.
So what is it about Donald Trump's makeup that makes him unique as a person? You meet him, he's like just to me, a showman, a classic New Yorker, very hospitable, ebullient, extrovert, but there's something special in the way he governs, I guess, or rules.
Yeah, I think he has a restlessness. He's reckless. He's restless. He wants to build things. He's a builder. And he dealt in New York, not to impugn New York, but if you're going to be a builder in New York, you've got to deal with unions. You've got to deal with shady city council people, wacko environmentalists, ethnic groups. And he did, and he built stuff quickly. And that required certain skills. I mean, he was a good friend of Al Sharpton, Mike Tyson. He was a friend of everybody. That was one of his. So when he got to Washington, he was able to navigate around all these different people. The other thing is, I don't know where he picked it up. Maybe it was from the building trades, but he has a genuine empathy for working people that working people's representatives don't. So every time I see a Democrat who says he's for the working class, they never are. They're elitists. But I had a friend who viewed from a high rise in New York a building that Trump was building. He said no one could see what Trump was doing, but he would drive by in his limousine, get out with his wingtips and suit, and then go out and get dirty talking to all the people building his building. He was happy. You could see that at the McDonald's. You can see that at the rallies. Yeah. He, with that grating Queens accent and the kind of funny makeup and all of that, doesn't quite work, but it's kind of what the middle class does. You know what I mean? He feels more comfortable with them, even though he's very impressed by wealth and success, and that comes across as being authentic. So I don't think Donald Trump, I can't think of a major Democratic candidate that doesn't modulate their accent. Remember Hillary, when I didn't come so far, or every time Obama got in front of a black audience, he had. Kamala Harris did the same thing.
Gavin Newsom's the worst.
Yes, he's the worst. His Spanish fake accent is really bad. But he came to Tulare, about 20 miles from here, to the Ag Center, and he gave a talk. And I talked to a lot of people that were there, and I said, I didn't know much about him in 2015. So I said, well, did he do the real thing? And they said, what do you mean? Well, you had the hay bales in the John Deere park, and you probably gave him a John Deere hat. And then he put a straw in his mouth, and he changed his accent. And he had, because I had seen Romney and McCain and everybody do it. And he had the blue jeans and the vest on. No. I said, well, what did he do? He said, well, it was about 105, Victor. And he came there and his makeup was dripping down. And he had a black coat and a red tie and wingtips. And this weird floppy hair in the wind, and he had this weird accent, and the guy was, is it Bronx or Queens or what is it? So he never changes, and that's authentic, and people can appreciate that. And he actually has a human side, and when that's kind of the tragedy too, that they keep saying he's crazy and mean and cruel, but he's reactive. He's not proactive. He never really goes out and picks fights with people. He reacts to them. He waits like almost he's spring-loaded. And if somebody attacks him, no matter how lowly, he'll go back after them. But he doesn't gratuitously start fights. I've noticed that. And he never attacked Megyn Kelly, or he didn't attack in their recent reboot Tucker until they attacked him. And then he went DEFCON 1 on all of them. But he can be very funny. And
yes.
That's kind of tragic too, because the left has created this image of him that he's mean-spirited and this. But he gets things done. Yeah. If you go to him and these people go to him and they say, we've got to do something about this problem of corruption, or Washington's a mess. And then he says, what do you want to do? And then they say things like, well, here are the 5 things. Here's the most effective, but the most politically, and he goes, do it. That's what he likes. And sometimes he gets in trouble, but people, I think, in the end appreciate it. I don't think he's going to ever be a 55-60% popular president, not with the types of changes he's trying to make.
One of the most interesting insights that someone gave me recently about Donald Trump and the way he deals, particularly with foreign leaders, was a woman originally from Russia who said that she thinks Donald Trump is using the Stravinsky method of acting when he deals with someone like Putin, in terms of he inhabits the character and makes himself believe that he really admires and likes Putin and that they're great friends. So when he meets him, Putin thinks it's authentic.
They say that about the NATO leader and also the Finnish prime minister. They likes both of them, and when they're around them, I guess one of them the Finnish guy plays golf and everything. Yeah. I think that's true. I have a book coming out in August called Counter Revolution: The Fall and Rise of Donald Trump, and it starts on January 6th. And it ends on January 6th of this year. So it's all done and it's being printed. But I really learned a lot. And what I learned was that after I went through the whole 4 trials, the deballoting, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, I don't think anybody alive could have taken that type of, I've forgotten what they said about him, what they did about him, how outrageous it was, how crazy it was. And the 2 impeachments, he's taken a level of abuse, and not the 2 assassination attempts. It's really remarkable. The left would say he's Rasputin-like, but it's kind of like that. Everybody cites the cartoon, Roadrunner.
Yeah.
And he can't be, Wile E. Coyote can't kill him. They think they have him. And they think they have him now. I just heard Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell and Ro Khanna, who's out here, and he's dropped all of his I'm the new Clinton type of Democrat. Now he's just crazier than anybody. And he's obsessed with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He's
Hassan Piker.
Yes, they're promising all sorts of things. They're going to go after his family. They're going to do this. They're going to do that.
They've done it all before.
Yeah, they've done it all before, and it never worked.
So Counter-Revolution, I can't wait for the book. It's out in August. And it's so important to, I think, chronicle that remarkable resilience and the attacks on him and his family and his supporters. So what is the counter-revolution? Is that meaning that the leftist revolution had almost succeeded,
I think,
by the end of Biden?
Yeah. I have an anecdote that sometime after about the 4th month, I stopped getting, we all at Stanford get these self-righteous emails, as in every university, from deans that want to be provosts and provosts want to be president. And there was an incident on campus. This is not who we are. I am outraged. And it's usually some minor thing, but they were putting they, them, or X, Z, for their pronouns. And that's vanished. It just vanished. They stopped. And then I noticed we had this horrific 400. It was supposed to be, the rule says one night you can camp on campus. They were almost there for a year. There were hundreds of people out there for Hamas after October 7th. It was very grotesque. And then suddenly there's a new president and they're not there anymore. You can't do that anymore. And the same thing with the trans. I never thought that the the Olympic Committee would say no trans boy biological males. He's really kind of crushed that. The DEI, the Pentagon, everybody has got them out, and they're on the run, I think. Not that they've given up. And then the gas revolution. I mean, we're up to 14 million barrels, and now we're talking about it. We're the largest natural gas and oil producer in history. He wants to completely rebuild the military, but he's doing things that are very good. He's trying to look at smaller arms suppliers, different startups, and not just the revolving door of a general goes to Northrop, Lockheed, Raytheon, and then we have these multi-million-dollar platforms. It's being kind of like World War II, a lot of good stuff, but we don't really need to make perfect stuff that's too expensive and very limited in number. So he's doing all of that, and then, if you were a traditionalist or conservative and you looked at right now, you'd say, wow, the states can adjudicate abortion, not the federal government. And wow, I'm not as afraid that the left's going to take away my guns. And my daughter probably, if there's boys in the restroom, I might have a fighting chance to stop that. And I can see it right here that I'm looking out a window where there were probably 5 homes a quarter mile away that used to be small ethnic farmers, Mexican American, Greek, Sikh, and now they were illegal aliens with 40, 50 people in enclave. And it was getting bigger and bigger. It's stopping now. And so you can see that. And so it was a cultural, economic, military, political, civilizational effort. It was even classical architecture he wants to bring back. He wants to bring back monuments. He wants to bring back an Arc de Triomphe. He's got the edge. He's after Harvard. He's after Stanford is in trouble now. He's going after the med school because they have race-based admissions. And I've never seen a president try to do that. They usually say that they're going to address these issues, but never in every capacity as a radical, not just to slow down the progress of the left, but try to completely overturn it and get back to some mythical age before the radical left. And it's going to be very hard for him to do it because he has not just the left, but he has the media, the academic world, the corporate boardroom, popular culture, professional sport. Everybody's against him, entertainment. And in his party, it was enough that I think they're kind of vestigial now, but the Never Trumpers have been joined now with the, it's kind of funny when you mentioned Tucker Carlson, he's kind of gone full circle back to Bill Kristol. You know what I mean?
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, because Bill Kristol he was one of the people who was blasting Trump for being a warmonger, and then he said the greatest taco of all time the next day.
Yes.
So they're back. So he has a lot of enemies or adversaries from all sides, and he doesn't have a lot of people supporting him that have that reach. There's Fox News, some of the podcasters, some of the but not. He doesn't have that institutional support.
I wanted to finish off, talk about the parallels with you, because in a way, you're an academic in the most prestigious institutions and an intellectual and, a historian, and yet you live on your farm that's been in your family for generations. And you went back to the farm when you could have been embraced by, and, I guess become a comfortable leftist and had everyone love you. And instead you sort of stuck with your roots. Why did you do that? And is that what makes you different and have this fresh or different perspective, more human perspective, I guess?
Well, it wasn't idealism. Originally, I was a graduate student at Stanford, and I had grandparents. So my parents worked in Fresno, so I had to come back and help them. So I was the only one of my brothers who was going to school in California. So I would take a classical Greek exam, get in an old car, drive all the way, take my grandparents to Eastern Star, Masonic Lodge that night, and then get on the tractor and help them and then get back. And they didn't like that. So I would get lectures from the faculty. They say, Victor, your exams are like speed bumps. You just want to get out of here. I said, did I do well? Yes, you got an A. But you passed your French and German test, but you don't speak it. I said, did I have to speak it or just read it? It was always that antagonism. And then
They probably knew that they couldn't control you if you were.
I guess I don't know.
Going home.
It was always hot. They never said I couldn't do the work. I did very good work. I published my thesis very soon. But then when it came time to get a job, of course, I should confess this. I shouldn't confess it, but in those days you were not allowed to look at your recommendations. But everybody would send it to a friendly. I think I sent it to the Salma Pump Company or something. And they showed me what they wrote. I said, I'm applying for this job. And it was like, he did excellent work on the exams. He wrote a book that is published. However, his attitude is not conducive for department politics. He resents the academic mission. He's not a complete intellectual. He doesn't know much about ballet, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I farmed for 5 years, and I finally went up to Fresno State, and I started a class. They gave me one class, and the first thing they said was, why are you here? We don't hire people. And I said, I grew up here, and I'd like to teach Latin. So we have one Latin class. And then I was able to, when I retired 20 years later, we had 5 professors in a classics program. But most of my kids were all either Mexican-American, Hmong, or poor white. And so they were the people I grew up with, and I still see today. So I went back to Hoover when I was, I went back there when I was 49. I'm 72, and I thought I might move there. But I liked the people at Hoover, but Stanford, I had remembered what Stanford. I had been a visiting professor there 1 year too. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the Bay Area. I didn't like it. And so I would drive back and forth. It's 210 miles. So it was 400 miles. I still do it if I can get over this. I haven't been driving lately, but it was kind of schizophrenic because they're two antithetical cultures. You know, I will have a guy come over here on the place. And the other day, a guy came in and he said, I want to remove that tree of yours. And I said, fine. And he had a smoky, he could barely speak English. He had a trailer, Rodriguez something licensed tree removal. But it was the most decrepit truck and trailer, but it was a little small. I couldn't care less. Mm-hmm. And then I had remembered that I had driven into Stanford and there was a Mexican-American guy ahead of me. And he had all of the brush and from all the nice campus homes. He was one of the gardeners, but he had a little white smoke coming out. And I just said to myself, this guy is not going to last. So by the time I got to my office, one of the people in the office said to me, did you see this guy? I said, yeah. So what? He'll get it. I said, he'll get it fixed. He said, well, I called Santa Clara EPA. And they told me not to worry. They'd had 11 prior calls. So that's that world. It's kind of a Karen world. And here, there's it's a wild place here. It's a lot more dangerous, but especially with illegal immigration. But I like I grew up with farmers, and my grandfather never went to college, but he had 3 daughters, and he thought because he didn't have a son, they would have to do something other than farm to keep the farm. So he sent 2 of them to Stanford University, and he made sure they got graduate degrees. So one got a master's and was a college teacher, and the other one was a judge, a lawyer. And
your mother?
Yes, my mother. And they all came back. They married local people from here, and they were Democrats, but they were not loony Democrats. And so it was always assumed that I would come back, and so I'm in this house right here. I'm speaking from when I was a boy. This was a barn right here. It was the manger, and you can see the ceilings. So I remodeled it into a studio annex. Mm-hmm. But the house was built in 1870 by my great-great-grandmother. It's kind of a burden now because I had to do all the wiring. Everything's new on it, but it was very expensive. And the neighborhood has changed. It's not for small farmers anymore. It's corporate. And nobody lives here that farms. And illegal immigration, they take the farmhouses and they rent out to illegals who then sublet it. Some of them are very nice, but when I walk at night, I've seen a corpse in my orchard. I've seen a semi stolen. I've seen people stripping down cars. I've seen people injecting, fornicating, stealing, and you don't know what to do.
Gosh.
So it's a
in a
wild
rural
west.
area. Yeah.
Yes, and garbage. I mean, we have a very scenic farm, but when it just kills me to go down near the pond and see washers and dryers and baby clothes and cars get thrown in there. So there's a lot of.
So why do you
downside.
stay?
I don't know. I was saying that the other day because I'm in California where you pay all these tax. We just did our taxes and we said state, federal, and local was 55% of our income. I don't know with gas and sales. I guess it's age. Before I got ill last year, I was thinking of moving, but I don't know what to do. I had 2 children. One of them lives up in a very nice place in the foothills above Sacramento, and the other one lives in the foothills above Fresno. And they don't want to come back because of the schools and things. They went to school here. And I had a daughter who did, but she passed away. She really loved it here. But and I'm 72 and I have to get over this. If I can get over this problem, I don't know what. My wife loves it here, but we'll see.
The weather is gorgeous. It's a blessed place, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's I just everybody. My problem is everybody that I really admired, that I grew up with, that were friends of my grandparents, farmers, tough guys, nice women. They're all dead, and their children all moved away, and it's a whole different world. So people say to me, "You should move because you think you're living on the small farm of the 1950s and 60s. It doesn't exist. Your house exists, but it doesn't exist. It's just an artifact." And I'm in the city limits now, so that's even. This town is 1 mile away. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I'm going to move to Palo Alto, though.
I just wanted to finish off just saying that Clarence Thomas, I was struck, and the similarity I think with you, if I'm not being too bold, is he grew up on on a farm, helping his grandfather cut down trees, and was part of the physical world and the physical consequences of making mistakes or being sloppy. And I assume that's what you had too, and had to be very resourceful.
Yeah, we had to do it.
So is that sort of connection to the physical world?
Yes, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
I always think when we were 7 and 8, we had to drive a tractor and we had to fix things. And one of the biggest problems of having lung cancer and a heart problem is you're on a farm and everything is broken. So I walk out and I see the pump valve is broken, and then I start to try to fix it, and I get out of breath, and my heart rate's gone from 70 to 120. You know what I mean? Because it's just crazy because it's still recovering. So you can't do anything, and I think that's very good. My daughter all my kids were raised to work. We had a packing house, and there were 12 of us, 12 kids. There were my 2 brothers' families. And it was very tribal. I know that I'll finish with an anecdote. My son was a master forklift driver. He started when he was 6 or 7. And he was really good. And he went to Cal State University at San Luis Obispo, and he had a job at something like Home Depot. I won't mention the name. And he was sitting there once, and a big trucker came in at lunch, and he was having his lunch out on the dock, and the people who were authorized to unload the truck weren't there. But they had to have little green suits on, and they were city kids. They'd gone through this company's forklift driving. And my son said they were so slow, they don't know what they're doing. That's all about safety, and you can't do this, you can't do that. So he just jumped up, got on the forklift, and unloaded the whole thing in 10 minutes. It was concrete blocks too. So the guy got so happy, gave him a tip, and went, and they fired him the next day. So I went over there, I had to go over there, and they said he violated all the protocols. He didn't have his vest on. He wasn't certified. He didn't understand that these were heavy bricks. They had a point. They didn't want to get sued, but it's kind of what I think they had a good upbringing is what I'm on. They're very practical.
Yeah.
I think Clarence Thomas, I've talked to Clarence Thomas when he says he gets in his bus and goes all the way across country to watch University of Oklahoma. I like that. We need more people like that we need a residual that have been physical and fix things,
And why does that change the way you think about ideas?
I think it's because you don't pay attention to what people say, it's what they do. So, and you get a tragic sense. So, I had a Santa Rosa plum orchard that we were kind of in debt, and it was really a moneymaker. And it was a very heavy set, they call it, with plums. So we didn't know how to do it. So we went out and helped thin, but we thinned it. We put $25,000 thinning it so the plums that survived would be big. And they looked great. And then whoever thinks it's going to rain here and hail in June, it came from Santa Barbara. It was just 20 minutes of the big hail, and it destroyed the whole crop. And what do? Do you say, well, that was stupid to spend money on thinning? It doesn't matter. It's gone. And then what do? And then you say, well, can we sell them at farmer's market? Yes. You get any money? No. And then by July, they're rotting. You have to take them off the tree or they'll get worms. So what I'm getting at is rhetoric doesn't matter. Degrees don't matter. Everything is judged on performance and your ability to overcome the inexplicable.
And inevitable.
Yeah, the inevitable. You're kind of... And so I know when I went to the oncologist, she said, well, you grew up in an area that has very dirty air, the valley, and we've got a lot of patients, and you were exposed to which pesticide? And I said, I was exposed to paraquat, dimethoate, parathion, malathion. Did you use Protect? I said, nobody used. But I said, I had bad genes. It could be anything. But you just accept the world as it is, you can't, and you have to have I do believe in Christianity, there's some purpose to it, but it doesn't do any good to be clever or to disguise the truth with sophism or anything.
Or think you can control it.
Yeah, he has some of that he just wants to do things, and he doesn't care how he describes it. It's just there. And I think that's unfortunately for me, the most extreme worlds of that, the most mechanical and the ones you have to farm and mechanical and stuff, and the most artificial is academia. So they were completely opposite. So I still get a headache when I go from one to the other. And I came home I was 25 when I didn't even go to my graduation when I got my PhD at Stanford. I didn't even go. So I came home, and my dad said to me, well, how'd it go? I said, I got a PhD. He said, you did? I said, yeah, in classics. And he said, well, what now? When I said, well, there's no jobs, I'm a white male, and I'm not particularly liked. Well, why aren't you liked? Well, I said, I acted too much like you, I said to him. And he said, well, there's a raisin dehydrator down there, and you're not a very good welder, but you'll learn. And there's a guy on the roof, so get down. That was the day I got home. And my brother was very educated. He was really brilliant. He was a writer. Still there. I think he's disappointed in my politics, but he's a very good writer. He's very bright. And he quoted something from Samuel Johnson. So you knew Greek? I said, yes. Can you write it? I said, that's how you learn to read it. And he said, well, you know what? It's sort of like a dog that can dance or a woman who can preach. It's very impressive, but what's the point?
Well, it kept you humble, and humility is the greatest virtue.
Yeah, it helped. I love Greek literature. I read it every day, and Latin. And I wasn't too good on other things, and metrics and stuff, but I knew Latin and Greek pretty well. And that helps you write and think. There's a discipline in it. That helped me a lot. I had an untrained mind until I learned classic. Anyway, I've gone on too long about myself.
No, you're wonderful. I really appreciate all the time you've given us, and wish you all the best with your recovery. You haven't
try to do
skipped
my
a
best.
beat.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Victor
Miranda.
Davis Hanson.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Podforce One. Let us know what you thought of this week's show in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.